our next award is for the Art of Advocacy. And the Founders Art of Advocacy Award pays tribute to a voluntary leader in the community who advances research, information, and/or support services for either a specific genetic condition or beyond that to benefit other conditions and organizations. And this evening, Genetic Alliance, in a very intentional way, as part of our purposeful openness and our promoting an environment of openness, has expanded the concept of advocacy over the last year or so, and wants to make sure that even in our award this evening, we're very intentional about that expansion. And while in the past this award has been for a leader of an advocacy organization, so a very formal disease-specific sort of person who's started something, in the future, you can go really slow, Claire, it's fine. In the future, from here into the future, we're really looking at how do we define advocacy and recognize something that we have not recognized in the past, and that is that each and every one of us is an advocate, and that each and every one of us, whatever our position and our place, is advocating for the health of all. And so this evening our award will go to someone who is not founded an advocacy group or isn't working on just one issue, but working much more broadly to educate us all and to bring service to us all. I was asked, 3, 4, 5 months ago by Nature Genetics to read a book and write a review. The book is Spelling Love with an X. And I said, okay, to Nature Genetics, expecting that I was going to read another book by another mom about another disease and another kid. And I was astounded by the book, really transformed. And this is about transformational leadership, so my own leadership was transformed by the book. I'm going to read you a little bit of my excerpt of the review, and I invite you to read the rest. We have it at the registration desk. The book, Spelling Love with an X, was written by Clare Dunsford, who will receive our award this evening. Science, when it intersects with emotion, can be obscured, and the experience of living with disease, when described by a parent, is often moving, but not necessarily substantive. Clare Dunsford, whose son, JP, was born with Fragile X syndrome, deftly gives space to all dimensions of her son's diagnosis. She plunges the reader into a phenomenal melange of genetics, relationships, poetry, faith, and humor in Spelling Love with an X. Striving to decode her son's often scrambled thought and speech, she paints this image, and I quote, "I have to catch meaning on the fly, feint and dodge to feel it hit, but when it does, it hits home," unquote. Readers of this remarkable book do not have to catch meaning on the fly. Dunsford eloquently and correctly shares her growing understanding of JP's mutation responsible for Fragile X, in poetry and prose, in scientific terms, and in plain speak. Concurrent with her awareness of her son's need to shield himself from an unbearable intimacy, Clare calls us to that intimacy, and at times it does feel almost unbearable. Not for the guilty, pull-at-your heartstrings sentiment that a special needs child often evokes, but for the startling truth and authenticity with which he invites us into their lives. This liberates the reader to dive deeply into the meaning of a life that falls short of the Platonic ideal and unleashes its abundant richness. Whether one studies Drosophila, develops therapies for common conditions, or lives with someone affected by a genetic condition, this book makes essential connections. Science and poetry, shame and pride, sense and prattle are coaxed into relationship, allowing readers from any access point to grasp the whole. Speaking for research subjects, be they amoebas or humans, Clare asks that her story in humor and pain be called, quote, an unexpected blurt of sentience from the presumably inert, unquote. Scientists are called in this book to see the face of their work, and those who live with disease are called, again, quote, to inflect the drumbeat of DNA that courses through us so that it yields a rhythm we can dance to, unquote. I believe Clare Dunsford when she says, and dance we will. Far from being the depressive tone that so many stories of living with a disease are, we are left with this, again a quote, I still have these, an unquenchable belief that in and under life lay poetry, a constitutional hunger for order over chaos, a mother's blood-strong love for her child. X does not always herald the end of the alphabet. In the scrambled syntax of our new life, it is in some ways just the beginning. More than anything, Clare shows us that we can navigate life's crossings with grace. Clare, please come forward and receive your award. I cheat a lot, and all my comments and even our award is a quote from your book. Our gratitude to you for sifting through the patterns of shadow and light created in the crisscross of lines. Here lies advocacy.
And Sharon first called me out of the blue at my office and said, we're going to give you this award, the Art of Advocacy. I thought, advocacy? What does that have to do with me? And I think she touched on it actually in her introduction to me. But I immediately realized that as the mother of a child with special needs, like my fellow mothers, I've been an advocate since the day he was born. And I will be for the rest of my life, whether I write another book or not. And by the way, JP assumes that my next book will also be about him. I am so honored to be recognized by Genetic Alliance. This organization is in the vanguard of those who have recognized the discovery of the gene as a basic component of human life has powerfully altered scientific discourse about who we are, what it means to be human. The impact of this discovery can stun us into a facile reductionism that posits genes as defining our identity as individuals. A more subtle response is to imagine genes as portals to an intricate terrain that has its counterpart in the infinite variety found in the human species. Those with a fragile site on their X chromosome, those with an extra copy of the 21st chromosome, those with too many repeats on the Huntington gene, and millions of others with non-typical DNA, derive part of their identity from their genes, but only part of it. If I am an advocate for anything, it is that while we try to improve the lives of those with genetic diseases or conditions, we also must support who they are today. Richard Dawkins has described a gene as the center of a field of influence on the world at large. The FMR1 gene, which is fully mutated in my son, has a field of influence no greater and no less than its embodiment in JP. Indeed, it cannot exist without him, this joking, loving, anxious, peculiar young man whose words are muttered and unclear, but sometimes lyrical, whose gait is loping and awkward, but whose long arms are graceful, whose eyes cannot meet yours, but who will never miss your meaning. Thanks to all of you for all that you do to advocate for JP and all others like him. And thank you from the bottom of my heart for this honor.